Britton, David Cohn from the Daily Wire, the Crain and Company show, or you probably saw him in the movies. From Lady Ballers, the man, the myth, the legend, the Michigan man, who his team just won a national title. What's up, buddy? How we doing?
Brother Blake, how you doing, man?
Doing good. Well, the number one question I got for you is, it's not Brian Kelly if he would be going to Michigan. I want to know, what's it feel like, man? Your team, a place that you play quarterback at, just won a national title. How you living after what just happened with Michigan versus Washington?
I can't believe it, man. It's one of the greatest feelings, just because I thought that, winning championships on the national level may be unattainable for Michigan, just with the dominance that the Southeastern Conference has had for the last decade plus, really since I got done playing college football. And not only that, but the dominance that the Buckeyes have shown in Columbus, been the gold standard in the Big Ten for the last decade plus before this 40-3 run Jim Harbaugh went on these past 3 years. The guy pointed at himself in 2020 when they went 2-4 in that weird COVID year. And not only, but before that, hadn't beaten the Buckeyes, was 0-7 against Urban Meyer. He said, we're going to get there or we're going to die trying. That's what he said. Since he said that, they went 40-3, and Jim Harbaugh has proven what he's able to do when he gets a quarterback that is capable of playing football at a high level. I mean, he's proven it when he was at Stanford and had Andrew Luck. He got the most out of Alex Smith at the San Francisco 49ers for the first time. When everybody thought he was a number one overall pick bust, he drafted Colin Kaepernick and developed him into a quarterback that could go to the Super Bowl. When he got J.J. McCarthy, a lot of things turned around. And also, you have to give a big shout out to what Jesse Minter was able to do on the defensive side of the ball these past 2 years. Truly incredible, because that's the unit that led this team. But I can't believe it, man. 15-0, perfect season. And those guys in the locker room, they're the ones who accomplished that. I don't want to take too much credit for it. I took 0 snaps or anything, but all of us are standing on the shoulders of guys who came before us, and that those boys out there made a lot of us proud. That's for sure.
Well, we were talking about this before we started recording. It wasn't really for me. I thought that they'd be able to run the football. We had talked about that going into the game, because I didn't think Washington would be able to hang around there, because, look, defensively, they had not been great in that area all year long. Defensively for Michigan, my God. I mean, they remind me of an SEC type of team. The way that they tackle their defensive line, their front seven. Were you surprised at all because of how dynamic Washington was offensively? Were you surprised at just how good they locked down Washington in the Natty?
Not particularly, because think about this. I saw that same group of guys, different team, but same core group, beat the Buckeyes when they were led by C.J. Stroud, and they had Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Marvin Harrison Jr. all on the same unit, all on the same team, right?
Right.
Those guys are all playing on Sunday. C.J. Stroud has the Houston Texans in the playoffs right now winning games, okay? Those other guys are top 15 picks. So I've seen them beat that type of team before. I mean, to clamp down the way they did in the secondary, which Michigan's secondary is the most improved unit over the past decade. There was a time not that long ago, if you threw a deep ball against the Wolverines, it was either completed for a big play or it was a pass interference. Now you have guys like Mike Sanders and Will Johnson who were able to embrace that matchup. And then what Michigan did was they umbrella covered. They said, look, you can hit some plays in between the 20s, but we're going to clamp down and you're not going to score touchdowns on us. And it was something similar to the Detroit Lions just did against the Rams when they won their playoff game this past weekend. So I wasn't that surprised to see them beat that type of team. I was more surprised the week before when they beat Jalen Milroe and that Alabama team the way they did, because Michigan hasn't played a quarterback that can take off for 85 yards on any given snap with his legs. They usually play against a guy who sits in the pocket and they know where the launch angle is. For a guy like Jalen Milroe, if you overrush him, I mean, you guys saw up close and personal in the LSU game. If you overrush him and he finds a lane, he is gone. And if he does that too many times, he's going to open up passing windows and he can throw the ball. That's what I was a little bit more surprised to see, the way they were handled. Those two different styles of offense 1 week apart to finish the drill and win the championship.
Do you think this was win at all costs because of how the season played out? Whether it was, the Harbaugh being suspended at the beginning of the year, and then obviously the Connor Stallion stuff. Do you think that kind of set them on a path to like, hey, man, this is it? Like, no matter what happens, we're winning. They can't take it away from us winning it this year. Do you think that helped them get to and get over that hump?
I really started to feel down the stretch, Blake, like it was a team of destiny situation, especially when I saw the team go. First of all, the narrative was, well, you guys don't play anybody all season, and their non-conference schedule is unacceptable, right? Like you can't help who you play in the conference, but the non-conference schedule, yeah, Michigan, come on, let's schedule bigger brand teams, and they're going to get their fill next year with Texas coming to town. You got Washington and Oregon and USC and all these teams. Michigan has a top 3 toughest schedule in the country next year, but for this year, that was the narrative to start. Well, Michigan doesn't play anybody, and then it was, well, you had some sort of COVID. A player showed up to the building during COVID, and Jim Harbaugh wasn't being truthful, so he's out for 3 games and whatever they could attack you with. But then when the whole Connor Stallions thing came up, and you saw Michigan go on the road to play a top 10 team for the first time in the year, a very, very good Penn State team. And you want to talk about Michigan's defense, Penn State, when they had Chop Robinson, was right up there with them in terms of playing on that side of the ball.
Right.
For Jim Harbaugh to get suspended by the Big Ten, even though it wasn't a Big Ten violation, it was an NCAA violation. That's what the accusation was. The night before, like when he's on the plane ride to Happy Valley, when that happened, and I saw the way that team responded, and they went on the road and beat that Penn State team, I started to think, okay, that's a very significant win, because not only does it sort of undo all of this, oh, you guys only won because you had team signals or something, which is already silly to me, but it showed me the cohesion in the locker room. Then 2 weeks later, when they beat the Buckeyes, who I just said was the gold standard in the Big Ten for the last decade, when they beat Ohio with an interim coach, and it was Sherrone Moore who went over and shook Ryan Day's hand at midfield, that showed me like this team is together more than any team you can imagine. Does that mean they can finish the drill against an SEC team or an international championship? I don't know. Let's see. And then when they went 15-0 and they locked it off, it showed me like, man, this team really was, it undid all of, because if you're truly guilty of something, like if you're the players in the locker room or the coaching staff and you did something to gain a competitive advantage that is morally or ethically wrong, that is played out to me with your behavior when you go and compete. Right? Like you crack at some point because you know you did something wrong and you got caught. When you go and stick together like that and you have this bet mentality or this America's team mentality, to me that shows, hey, we were going to win it no matter what they said about us. And when everybody was beating up on Michigan for the past 15 years, they called them losers. Now when Michigan beats up on everybody, they call them cheaters. Well, if we have to pick between those two, go ahead and call us the latter, please.
Right. Well, look, it was a dominant performance. Even during the season, like when they played Maryland and Ohio State, I was like, well, man, if they play Washington, because look, Ohio State had some success, throwing the football, and so did Maryland to some extent. I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe Washington could, but it was just so impressive. And I think, Dave, for me, when it comes down to the end, the way that they tackle in space, I mean,
Yep.
it's just it was amazing. How they look. You brought up Sherrone Moore, which obviously begs the question. Obviously, we cover LSU and AYS, which I got to ask the overarching thing that continues to be brought up every single week. Now, I want to get the Michigan side of it and what you think about it. Brian Kelly's name has been brought up into potentially replacing Harbaugh if he were to go into the NFL. Number one, what are you hearing on Harbaugh? Do you think that he leaves? And does Brian Kelly, is that something that's actually realistic? Could he be the next head coach of Michigan if he leaves?
Man, this story was fascinating when it broke. I have several different thoughts here. The first one, let's just address the Jim Harbaugh situation, and it could break at any moment. It could break between when you and I were recording this before it's released. I don't know. No one knows what Jim Harbaugh is going to do. I don't even know if he knows what he wants to do. Obviously, with the success that he had at the San Francisco 49ers, he is going to be a hot commodity for NFL teams every cycle. And because every year we see these rumors play out, it means that he is entertaining them, right? We haven't heard Nick Saban to the NFL for the last 10 years, right? So he has entertained them. That's even before he won a championship. So now that he's gone 15-0, there's no better time than to go try your hand in the NFL again and try and get that elusive Super Bowl after you lost to your brother John Harbaugh than right now, because you could win 5 championships in a row at Michigan. You're never going to be more endeared to the fan base than you are right now. You accomplished everything that you went out to do. Now, obviously, I and most Michigan fans wish that Jim Harbaugh would stick it out at Michigan because he's got so much momentum right now. That's your alma mater. And I still view being the head coach at Michigan as even a better job than a lot of NFL teams. I'm a college football guy. That's what I love. Now, the money is another factor. I mean, if I've heard the Chargers are putting together a package between $15 and $18 million, and Jim Harbaugh has the same agent that Sean Payton had, and I think Sean Payton's getting that $18 to $20 million from the Denver Broncos. So at some point, Michigan has a lot of money they can pay him. I don't know if they'll get up to that number. I mean, even if you get up to 12.5 or 13, you're asking a guy to take $5 million a year less than he would just because this is his alma mater. Plus, he has to deal with the NCAA trying to run him out. I mean, God forbid, I think Jim Harbaugh is already under NCAA investigation for practicing before the national championship or something just that silly. So I don't know. I understand if the guy wants to go back to the NFL, now would be a great time. And there's only so many jobs that I think he would leave for. The Los Angeles Chargers, how often does a job come open when you have a franchise quarterback in his prime, the contract's already taken care of, and you have plenty of other pieces on both sides of the football? That franchise just needs a little bit of direction. Is the Spanos family, one, going to pay him what he's required, but also give up personnel control, either allow him to be the GM or pick the next GM? All of that stuff is the reason the news hadn't already broke, or I think that he would probably already be the head coach at the Chargers. So that's for him. If he wants to leave, I'll help him pack him stuff after a perfect season, man. Hats off to you. The next head coach at Michigan after that has to be Sherrone Moore. I don't know what else we're talking about. And here's the reason why. College football is about to enter a time of seismic shifts. We're talking about the college football playoff is going to be tripled from 4 to 12. Conference expansion, or really, like Jake Crain says, my co-host, conference reduction. I mean, the Pac-12 existed for over 100 years. Now, out of nowhere, over one summer, it doesn't even exist. Washington, Oregon, USC, UCLA, everybody's coming into the Big Ten, and now you're going to have to contend with that, and you play Texas next year. Like, it's a time of turmoil in college football. Don't you want to keep as much cohesion as possible with the unit, especially with a team that just went 15-0. You're playing with house money more than you ever have if you're the University of Michigan. Trust me, this one championship, Michigan fans will be talking about this for 50 years. Now, does that mean that we don't want to go out and hire the best coach possible? No, I just think that this template has proven to work over the past couple of years. Moore is 6-0 as the head coach because he had to fill in for Jim Harbaugh. Imagine that. You get the head coaching job at Michigan, you're already 6-0 and you have a win over the Buckeyes? Who else could ever say that? That's why you would have to give that guy an opportunity. Even if the ceiling isn't quite as high as it was with Jim Harbaugh, I think your floor is going to be higher than if you bring even a really, really good coach in and change a lot of things up. And then that gets us to Brian Kelly. Yes, if Michigan went out and hired Brian Kelly, a lot of people would be happy because I think the floor for the Michigan program, which they saw just how low the floor can go when I was a junior and Rich Rodriguez got brought in, the floor would be really, really high because Brian Kelly, for the same reason that the LSU was excited about him. Like, he's going to come in and do a great job. It surprises me that, one, this is the second LSU head coach since I've been affiliated with the program that I've heard could possibly go to Michigan. Now, Les Miles, we were supposed to get Les Miles when Lloyd Carr retired. That didn't happen because you guys were playing in the national championship and the timing was all messed up. That at least made sense to me. He coached under Bo Schembechler. He had been on the staff. He had a clause in his contract. The one job I would leave for is Michigan. Now, Brian Kelly's the winningest coach all time in the history of Notre Dame. Leaves for LSU. That was already surprising. Then after 2 years, you've already won the SEC West once and had a Heisman Trophy winner. You would leave for Michigan? I don't understand it. Now, both of them to me are top 6, top 7 jobs in the country. I really do think so. I think it's Alabama, Georgia, Buckeyes, Texas, LSU, Michigan, USC. I think all three of the big Florida schools, Florida, Florida State, Miami, are all vying for a spot in that top 10. I think Oklahoma, and Oregon's trying to play its way into that conversation with all the money they spend from the Nike money. But they're both top 6 or 7 jobs. I understand the appeal, but man, when you put a gate around just Baton Rouge, forget about the entire state of Louisiana. That's why a lot of guys want to go to LSU, because that state recruits itself already so well. So I don't know. To me, I hope Jim Harbaugh stays. I understand if he leaves, he probably will leave for the NFL. If that happens, Sherrone Moore has to be the logical next head coach at Michigan. Brian Kelly would be a great one. I don't know, Blake. What are you hearing? Do you hear that this is like he would legitimately leave LSU for this job?
Here's what I think. This is strictly opinion. Okay. Some of my opinion is based off of sourcing, but mainly opinion. I think he's doing this to try to get a bigger contract, meaning Brian Kelly, because look, he's making $9.5 million a year. You're going to have DeBoer, who's going to be in the same area that he is. I think ultimately I could see a world where, let's just say Sherrone Moore is elevated. All right. 2 days after the fact, LSU does a press release where Brian Kelly has been, accepted a new contract, 8 years, 85 million, 90 million, whatever it is. That's what I think is going to happen, because I think that agents do agent things. And look, Dave, we just saw what Jimmy Sexton did. Literally every Jimmy Sexton agent got a raise.
Oh, man. Everybody got paid. All of them got paid. It was incredible to see.
And even if he gets 10% of those contracts, Dave, in a week, this man made $1 million just based off of he had the lowest of percentages on these contracts. I'm going to say this, and I want your thoughts on this too, because I want to know what you think is going to happen. I don't know if it makes sense for me for Brian Kelly for 2 main reasons. Number one, he just got a commitment from Bryce Underwood, the number 1 quarterback, actually, ironically, from the state of Michigan.
Yeah.
Number 1 wide receiver in Crain Moore, who actually committed on our show to LSU, and then Harlem Berry, the number 1 running back. But that being in and of itself, I think the guys are committed here. If I want to go to Michigan, I'll go. But the biggest thing, and a question that I could let you dive into, I've seen the NCAA, specifically like at LSU, investigate things and completely screw the pooch. Is Michigan going to have any form or type of sanctions because of what happened? Why would that make any sense? Like if that happens, because Dave, you tell me this. Do you trust the NCAA enough to think that they're not going to do something more to Michigan? Because I don't. Even if I think it's BS, like what's going on, I think that they're going to do something because they're investigating it too hard.
Well, I'll take it a step further. The day after the national championship, the NCAA president, Charlie Baker, came out. He was asked, do you regret your decision to get involved with the Big Ten suspension of Jim Harbaugh? And he said, no, I don't regret our decision based off the information we have. And actually, to me, it legitimizes Michigan's championship even more. And there's nobody in the world right now that doesn't think Michigan's championship was earned. And I thought, okay, well, first of all, you need to get on Twitter. And second of all, why is it still under investigation then? You're in charge of it all. And you just said Michigan's championship is legitimate, but yet the investigations are still open. So no, nothing would ever surprise me. I don't think, it was a tough day when that got said for the hashtag vacate asterisk crowd for sure. But yeah, of course, something could still happen. I don't know. I don't know if this is a situation where, look, Jim Harbaugh has been pro player compensation. He's been pro life. I don't know if it's a situation where they just want him out of college football, which is a mistake because we need more great coaches in the game. And if they get him out and he goes to the NFL, they say, hey, all good, Michigan, hire who you want and let's all move forward. But if Jim Harbaugh comes back, then we're going to suspend him for 6 or 8 games next year. I have no idea. Maybe there will still be penalties. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say it, man. Brian Kelly's not going anywhere. Brian Kelly's not leaving LSU from Michigan. And I don't think Michigan will hire. I mean, think about the opportunity Michigan has right now. Okay. Michigan has a chance to hire an offensive coordinator who was 6-0 in games, one of which over your biggest rival, who called the game plans for the national championship and the final game against Nick Saban. You have an opportunity to elevate him. Also, let's don't kid ourselves. The athletic director at Michigan, Ward Manuel, he's a black guy, and so the opportunity to elevate Sherrone Moore and to hire what would be the first permanent black head coach in Michigan history, like that would mean something from that perspective too. So it checks too many boxes to me for Brian Kelly out of nowhere just to leave LSU when really I feel like the guy just got there. And you left when you were the all-time winningest coach at Notre Dame. At some point, it's seeming like, man, you gotta put something permanent on the resume there. And Nick Saban just left. Like Nick Saban just retired, and you landed the number 1 overall player. It just smells like a contractual thing, like you're saying.
I fully believe that's what's happening. Speaking of Nick Saban, look, this is such a horrible comparison, but there are moments in our lives, Cone, that I remember vividly, like where I was at, what I was doing, like the smell in the room of when a big time event happened. Like as an example, I remember, when I was in middle school and, our teacher turns on the TV during 9/11, like I remember Miss Matchnick's class, second period, the time, the TV, the channel. I remember girl Sarah that I tried to date for so long was sitting right behind me, and I was trying to pass.
Sarah.
Sarah. Okay, but you remember events like that when you saw the Chris Lowe breaking, Nick Saban is retiring. What did you think?
I didn't have the luxury of seeing it. You know why? Because I was on live Memphis radio with our boys over there at Sports 56. We were talking about Michigan's championship for 10 minutes, and then Brett Norsworthy out of nowhere hits me with, all right, next topic. Why don't you give us your thoughts on the breaking news here? Nick Saban is retiring.
Oh, my God.
I said, hold on. There's no way. Are you serious? He goes, yeah, and our sources just fact check it, and it's true. And so that's how I got hit with the news, having to respond to it live. Actually, I need to get that audio and put it out. But yeah, I mean, what can you say about the guy, but the greatest college football coach of all time? And, I'd like to hear your perspective on how LSU feels about him. We had Matt Moscona on the show the week that he retired. And I asked Matt, I said, look, this guy delivered the 2003 national championship to you, the first championship in how many decades for LSU. I know you had to go toe-to-toe with him for the last 17 seasons, not only in the same conference, but in the same division. But at some point, he has to be embraced by the LSU fan base, no?
Oh, well, so that night, I did like a 40-minute segment, and I don't do those. Like it looked like this, even this recording, like we're 20 minutes into this. That's about how long, I'll stay as long on a segment. I went 40 minutes because he woke up a sleeping giant. What people forget is that LSU made him the highest paid head coach in the country in 2000. It was the first coach to make over $1 million. People called LSU batshit crazy. Now, the funny thing about that is you remember iconic things. People were dressing like him, Cone. They were wearing the turtlenecks. They were doing their hair like Nick, right? They were talking like him. They were acting like him. Being a 13-year-old teenager, okay, when they won their first national title in this 20-year run that they've been on, I will always be grateful for Nick. But the way that he left, him saying that he wouldn't come back, the 17-year reign, okay, that he held over the SEC, specifically LSU, because, Cone, here's the thing for me. In the last 20 years, since 2003, so we've had 20 years of 20 played seasons. For national titles, it's Alabama, and then it's LSU, okay? Saban with like 5, 6 of them, LSU with 3, and play for a 4th one. How many more could we have gotten? Could LSU have been the dynasty that they had put in it to be in Saban leaving? Now, I do think LSU has a very ironic chance now that the guy's out to do things, like to get back to where they were supposed to be all those years. I'm grateful. I'm happy. So Dave, in our studio, I have a picture of Joe Burrow. Okay. I have all 3 national titles right here on the wall. Well, the first one's Nick,
Gotcha.
I just remember that more than anything. And it was my favorite team of all time. Even 19 was what it was. You can't, that's a historic team, maybe the best team all time. Yes, I'm always going to love that team. But 2003 is it for me.
Okay, well, that's the point I'm making about Michigan. If Jim Harbaugh goes and wins 5 more in a row right now, of course, that would be unbelievable. Let's go get our dynasty, but you're not going to be any more endeared than you are right now to the fan base, man. So if you're going to leave for the NFL because it's just an itch that you have to scratch because you cannot go look your brother in the eye at Thanksgiving because he got that Super Bowl over you, then do it right now, brother. You got to do it now.
Well, let me ask you this. One final question before I get you out of here. There was a press, not a press release, article that came out about Harbaugh potentially wanting in his contract that he would not be fired, depending no matter what happened with the NCAA investigations. People that I've just seen so, oh, you can't do that. Why not?
This makes so much sense. I would put it in if I was on the Michigan side of it. It's not like Jim Harbaugh is asking, hey, I want something in my contract that says I can never be fired because of NCAA investigations moving forward. I can do whatever I want and I can never be held responsible. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the overhang of 2 investigations that are underway, which honestly, if you're the Michigan athletic director or the powers that be at the university, you should already know what's in there. You should already know what holds water and what doesn't. And that's what I was told. Remember, after the Penn State game, the university said, no, we're going to fight this. We're going to go to court and there's nothing here. And then a couple of days later, like, no, Coach Harbaugh is going to serve his suspension. Well, like, to me, you should already know what's in there. And that should have been something you came to the table with, is saying, Jim Harbaugh, here's our contract. Here's the most money we can offer. It's probably a couple million a year short than the NFL can offer, but you just won a national championship. You're on an unbelievable run. Let's create the greatest dynasty since Nick Saban has done this at Alabama. Let's create one here at Michigan. And you know what? We're not going to hold you accountable for any of these NCAA investigations that are ongoing right now because we know they're a farce. They're trying to run you out of the game, and we're not going to stand for it. We've got your back. That's what they should have. It shouldn't even be Jim Harbaugh having to say this. Now, I don't know what rules got broken and what he knew did. All I know is that the NCAA has had the guy's laptop and cell phone for over a year now. So wouldn't he have already, like, you can already have fired the guy and run him out if that's the case. So, or maybe behind the scenes, they're hoping that he moves on so that they don't have to pay a big contract and they can just elevate Sherrone Moore, which is maybe what they want to do anyway. I don't know. It just seems like the guy just delivered the greatest season in the history of the winningest program in college football. The greatest season the program has ever known, and they've won more games than any other one. He just delivered that for you. This is his alma mater. You need to be doing whatever you can to keep the guy. And if what tears him away at the end is just that undeniable itch to go coach in the NFL one last time to chase a Super Bowl, then you're never going to compete with that anyway.
Yeah, and you can't. You can't because, look, coaches are a different breed on how they think. Like Kalen DeBoer coming down to – and you know what else, Dave, when you were talking this whole time? You know what I kept thinking about promoting Sherrone Moore? Do you want what happened in Alabama to happen to you?
We talked about that on today's show, and I think it's 2 different situations. One, what we're talking about at Michigan was supposed to happen at Alabama, and it was supposed to happen with Steve Sarkisian. Right. Nick Saban told Steve Sarkisian apparently to turn down several jobs he was offered because you're going to succeed me at Alabama. Then the Texas job came open. You can't turn down Texas. You have to go take the Texas job. So obviously Steve Sarkisian wasn't going to come back to Alabama from Texas after he's already built the foundation, made the college football playoff this year, and you have as many resources there as you do at Alabama. Right. Dabo Swinney, sort of the same thing. Like, you've already built something really, really special at Clemson. I understand you played and won a national championship at Alabama, but I understand that. I think with Alabama, it was you weren't going to elevate the defensive coordinator or the offensive coordinator to head coach. The best thing you can have happen is to go and hire the best coach possible moving forward, which
Right.
I really think they did. Kalen DeBoer is an unbelievable coach. Is he obsessed with recruiting the way that he's going to need to be to compete down there? Obsessed with it the way Nick was? Obsessed with it the way Kirby Smart is? I don't know yet. We have to see that. All I know is the guy wants talent, gets on campus, he can develop it, and he can call a game plan like no other. So he's going to be a serious problem in the Southeastern Conference. I just think it was two different situations, and hey, you're going to have to deal with a little bit of attrition and a little bit of transfer portal issues when you bring in a new coach, and that's just, you're playing for the long game to me if you're Alabama there.
Completely agree. David Cohn, Daily Wire, Crain and Company. Thank you so much for joining us, man.
Thanks for having me, man.